We rock. Oh, okay. Yep.
We got a dog and the A-20 command vehicle. Well, no, they have like a little inversion and stuff. It's to the left, they're bringing it up. It's like the Israeli. It's like the instructions. He just went into the left. He's backing up.
Yerden hayırlı nebatat bitir. Ya Rabbi, yüce devletimizin bahtiyarı. Ağızlarımızın tadı bozulmadan bizleri Ramazan bayramına kavuştur Allah'ım. Ya Rabbi, fırsatlarla Allah'ım. Tutmuş oldukları hile ve desizeleri kendi başlarına mahsus eyle. Ya Rabbi, hasaten devletimizin sevdiği idare eden devlet büyüklerimize güç, sıhhat ve sahip Allah'ım. Hayırlı çalışmaların altına imzalar atabilmeyi nasip eyle. Birlikte beraberliğimizi daim ve kaim eyle.
Yeah, Cyprus does, and this is just something happening right now, so we want to show you right now. This is a truck that's
Where you going? Yep. Is it working?
On this side now?
Cool. It's good as pleasure. You picked the worst spot to go through.
Cumhurbaşkanımız Cumhurbaşkanımız Sayın sizlerle içimizlerimizi bu programımızda ağırlamayı gururunu yaşıyor. Bu duygu ve düşüncelerle hoş geldiniz, şeref verdiniz diyoruz. Sayın Cumhurbaşkanımız, saygıdeğer efendi, değerli konuklarımız, şimdi konuşmalarını yapmak üzere Tarım ve Orman Bakanımız Sayın İbrahim Yumak Bey kürsüye arz ederiz. Buyurun Sayın Bakanım.
Mübarek Ramazan ayının ülkemiz, milletimiz, devletimiz ve İslam alemine hayırlar getirmesini niyaz ediyorum. Başta Gazze olmak üzere tüm mazlum milletlere Yüce Allah'tan huzur ve felah niyaz ediyorum. Bu güzel buluşma için ülkemizin dört bir yanından gelen bütün çiftçi kardeşlerimize hoş geldiniz diyorum. ve sizlerin şahsında milyonlarca üreticimizi ve ailelerini yürekten selamlıyorum. Değerli üreticilerimiz, bugün bu sofrayı paylaşmamızda sizlerin büyük emeği olduğunu biliyoruz. Toprağa işleyen öpülesi ellerinizle sofralarımıza bereket katıyorsunuz. Gıdada ele güne muhtaç değilsek, bunun temeli sizlersiniz. Pandemide, depremde, her koşulda üretimden vazgeçmeyen siz gizli kahramanlarımızdan Allah razı olsun. Biz de bakanlık olarak 160 bin arkadaşımla birlikte her zaman sizlerin yanındayız, yanında olmaya devam edeceğiz. Sektörümüzün bütün paydaşlarıyla el ele vererek inşallah Türkiye yüzyılını hep birlikte bereketin yüzyılı haline getireceğiz. Sayın Cumhurbaşkanım, çalışmalarımızda güçlü liderliğinizi her zaman arkamızda hissediyoruz. Tarım sektörüne vermiş olduğunuz destekten dolayı zat halinize şükranlarımı arz ediyorum. Ülkemizin dört bir yanından milletin evine gelerek bize gönüllerini açan siz değerli üreticilerimize teşekkür ediyorum. Sözlerime burada son verirken Ramazan bayramınızı şimdiden tebrik ediyor, saygılarımı sunuyorum, Allah'a emanet olun.
Efendim bizler de değerli konuşmaları için Tarım ve Orman Bakanımız Sayın İbrahim Yumaklı'ya huzurlarınızda teşekkürlerimizi sunuyoruz. Değerli konuklarımız, şimdi sizlere hitap etmek üzere bizlere ev sahipliği yapıp programımızı katılımlarıyla bizleri onurlandıran Cumhurbaşkanımız Sayın Recep Tayyip Erdoğan'ın kürsü teşriflerini arz ederiz. Buyurunuz Sayın Cumhurbaşkanım.
Buyurun, buyurun. Değerli çiftçi kardeşlerim, ülkemizin dört bir yanından 81 ilden gelen kıymetli üreticilerimiz, kıymetli misafirler, sizleri en kalbi duygularımla, hasretle, muhabbetle selamlıyorum. Bu mübarek akşamda milletin evinde sizleri ağırlamaktan duyduğum memnuniyeti dile getirerek sözlerime başlamak istiyorum. Soframızı şereflendirdiğiniz için her birinize şükranlarımı sunuyorum. Artık 19. gününü geride bıraktığımız Peygamber Efendimizin cehennem azabından kurtuluş olarak
milk in my battery. I'll take a look at it.
Saldırılara teslim olmadan Türkiye'nin iyiliğini istemeyen alçakların sabotajlarına prim vermeden 85 milyonun huzuru ve esenliği için gayret gösteriyoruz. Hem tarıma hem de yaz kış demeden üretim yapan çiftçi.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are we? It's a newsy day indeed. And last night we saw the very best of America. After spending nearly 300 days aboard the International Space Station, Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams are back on Earth. These two incredible astronauts were only supposed to be up there for 8 days, but because of the Biden administration's lack of urgency, they ended up spending 9 months in space. Joe Biden's lack of courage to act boldly and decisively was a big reason why Butch and Sunny did not make it back until yesterday. But President Trump doesn't waste time. Immediately after taking office, President Trump directed Elon Musk and SpaceX to rescue these brave astronauts alongside NASA. The president also called the acting administrator of NASA and told her to bring the astronauts home as soon as possible. As acting administrator Janet Petro said herself yesterday, per President Trump's direction, NASA and SpaceX worked diligently to pull the schedule a month earlier. The president looks forward to welcoming Butch and Sunny to the Oval Office when they are recovered. This historic mission brings new meaning to President Trump's promise to always look out for the forgotten man and woman. On another important matter, yesterday, President Trump and President Putin spoke about the need for peace and a ceasefire in the Ukraine war. Both leaders agreed this conflict needs to end with a lasting peace and also stressed the need for improved bilateral relations between the United States and Russia. President Trump also spoke with President Zelensky this morning to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their needs and requests. As President Trump has said repeatedly, the precious lives and money that both Ukraine and Russia have been spending in this war would be better spent on the needs of their people. This terrible conflict would have never started with President Trump in charge, but he's determined to end it once and for all. President Trump also promised maximum transparency and a commitment to rebuild the trust of the American people in our intelligence community. Part of that promise was to fully release previously classified records related to the assassination of former President John F. Kennedy, and he made that happen yesterday. This historic release consisted of approximately 80,000 pages of previously classified records that are now published. The records are available to access either online at archives.gov/JFK or in person, accessible to the American people at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland. Records that are currently only available for in-person viewing are being digitized and will be uploaded in the coming days. On another note, positive economic data continues to pour in, showing the immediate impact of President Trump's pro-growth agenda. After suffering a steep decline in the final year of the Biden administration, the manufacturing sector came roaring back in February. Industrial production surged in February, these are new numbers, 3 times at a greater 3 times rate than the expectations to its highest ever recorded level. And President Trump's laser focus on massive deregulation and unleashing our domestic energy industry is leading to stabilities for Americans' bottom lines. As Newsweek summed it up today, gas prices are plummeting under President Trump. And the Trump administration continues to make American communities safer through our ongoing mass deportation campaign of illegal alien criminals. Yesterday, FBI Director Kash Patel announced the agency captured another fugitive from its 10 most wanted list, securing the extradition of Francisco Javier Roman Bardeles, a key senior leader of the brutal MS-13 gang. And the brave men and women of ICE also arrested a number of dangerous aliens across the country in recent days. You will see them on this screen. ICE San Francisco just arrested a citizen of Guatemala convicted of sexual battery. ICE New Orleans arrested a citizen of Ecuador convicted of rape in Suffolk County, New York. ICE Atlanta arrested a citizen of Mexico convicted of assault by strangulation. ICE Dallas arrested a citizen of Mexico convicted of assault with a firearm and rape with a foreign object. And ICE Houston arrested a citizen of Guatemala convicted of indecent sexual contact with a child in Texas. These are heinous criminal alien monsters who the previous administration allowed to flood into our country. And every time President Trump and this team deport one of them, our country becomes safer. Finally, before I open it up to questions, I want to tout how successful our efforts have been in filling out President Trump's administration. There have been a record number of 281 Senate confirmed nominations already, with another 280 in process. Here at the White House, OPM and GSA, we have filled 100% of the total number of slots. And this is a record number of placements in the first 58 days of any administration, and a testament to the caliber and the sheer quantity of talented people who want to work for President Trump to make America great again. Here in our new media seat today, we have Katie Pavlich. Katie is the editor of townhall.com, which is a subsidiary of Town Hall Media. It's a leading conservative news and opinion outlet based right here in Washington, D.C., with writers and journalists reporting around the country. Last year, Town Hall Media had 60 million unique users and 1.4 billion page views, with a broad reach on a number of social media platforms. With that, Katie, please kick us off.
Thank you, Caroline. Really appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you. So given the back and forth with this U.S. District Judge and the administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act, does the President plan to send new and additional flights of Venezuelan gang members, now designated as foreign terrorists, from the U.S. to El Salvador or elsewhere? Can Americans expect to see those flights sometime soon?
Americans can absolutely expect to see the continuation of the mass deportation campaign that has been successfully led by this President, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, and also our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Since you brought up the judges, I would like to point out that the judges in this country are acting erroneously. We have judges who are acting as partisan activists from the bench. They are trying to dictate policy from the President of the United States. They are trying to clearly slow walk this administration's agenda, and it's unacceptable. As the President said last night, we will continue to comply with these court orders. We will continue to fight these battles in courts. But it's incredibly apparent that there is a concerted effort by the far left to judge shop, to pick judges who are clearly acting as partisan activists from the bench in an attempt to derail this president's agenda. We will not allow that to happen. And not only are they usurping the will of the president and the chief executive of our country, but they are undermining the will of the American public, tens of millions of Americans who duly elected this president to implement the policies that are coming out of this White House.
And then one more question. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said yesterday that he was united with Democrats in working against Americans who, quote, their attitude is, I made my money all by myself, how dare your government take my money from me? Or, I built my company with my bare hands, how dare your government tell me how to treat my customers? What is the president's response to this given his upcoming tax agenda and need to work on Capitol Hill?
Well, we certainly hope that Democrats all of a sudden are for more money in the pockets of the American public. The president has made it incredibly clear that he is committed to tax cuts. He is committed to passing a big reconciliation package later this year, ending no taxes on tips, taxes on overtime, no taxes on Social Security for our hardworking seniors. And we encourage everybody on Capitol Hill to support that when it comes to the finish line, especially Democrats who clearly need a boost from the American public right now. Their approvals are at an all-time record low. Thanks for being with us, Katie. Garrett.
I have one other question, but I want to follow up on Katie's question, actually. You said the mass deportation campaign would continue, but she asked about the flights specifically. Will those flights to El Salvador continue while this case is being appealed?
We don't have any flights planned specifically, but we will continue with the mass deportations. And I would just like to point out that the judge in this case is essentially trying to say that the president doesn't have the executive authority to deport foreign terrorists from our American soil. That is an egregious abuse of the bench. This judge does not have that authority. It is the opinion of this White House and of this administration, and that's why we're fighting this in court. And it's very, very clear that this is an activist judge who is trying to usurp the president's authority. Under the Alien Enemies Act, the president has this power, and that's why this deportation campaign has continued. And this judge, Judge Boasberg, is a Democrat activist. He was appointed by Barack Obama. His wife has donated more than $10,000 to Democrats, and he has consistently shown his disdain for this president and his policies, and it's unacceptable.
I wanted to go about the idea that these people are all foreign terrorists, but Judge Boasberg was originally appointed by George W. Bush and then elevated by Barack Obama. I just feel like I should clear that up.
Well, let me just say something to that effect, Garrett. 67% of all of the injunctions in this century have come against which president? Donald J. Trump. Let me say that again. 60% of the injunctions by partisan activists in the judicial branch have come against President Donald Trump, and 92% of those have been from Democrat-appointed judges. This is a clear, concerted effort by leftists who don't like this president and are trying to impose or slow down his agenda.
So, given that, do you think it's a good use of Congress's time and the president's political capital to try to impeach and remove a federal judge, which would take 67 votes you're unlikely to get in the Senate?
Well, look, the president has made it clear that he believes this judge in this case should be impeached, and he has also made it clear that he has great respect for the Chief Justice John Roberts, and it's incumbent upon the Supreme Court to rein in these activist judges. These partisan activists are undermining the judicial branch by doing so. We have co-equal branches of government for a reason, and the president feels very strongly about that. Jackie.
What options does the president have to, he says he's going to follow court orders. He wouldn't defy a court order, but he's raised these concerns about these judges acting in such a partisan way. What option does he have to ensure that his agenda continues to move forward while this is ongoing and the judges appear to be trying to just block and delay and impede?
Well, you're right. They are trying to block, delay, and impede. This is lawfare. The president is no stranger to it. He faced it in his campaign, and this is a continuation of the lawfare that President Trump faced as a candidate, and he's now unfortunately facing as a president. Clearly, these partisan activists in the judicial branch didn't get the memo on November 5th when the American people overwhelmingly re-elected this president to continue with mass deportations. So White House counsel and the Department of Justice are working on this. They're appealing these cases, and we will continue to use the full weight of the White House counsel's office and the president's team of lawyers to fight this in court, because we know we will win even if we have to go all the way to the Supreme Court.
One more on TDA. Andy McCarthy said in an interview with Hugh Hewitt, he certainly agrees with what the president is trying to do with the Alien Enemies Act, but he's not sure that the law is completely on his side. He cites some previous Supreme Court rulings dealing with enemy combatants in wartime, says that even they have a right to challenge their detention in court. He raised concern also that while TDA has been designated as a terrorist organization, these individuals hadn't been prosecuted for terrorism. So my question is, will the president ask Congress potentially to declare war on these cartels for the invasion that he's talked about so that he's on stronger legal footing?
Well, we absolutely disagree with the legal opinion of the individual that you mentioned. We would not have moved forward with this if we didn't believe the president, this was within the president's executive authority to continue with this mass deportation effort under the authority provided to him under the Alien Enemies Act. And when you read the act, as I did last time at the podium, a predatory incursion is absolutely what has happened with Tren de Aragua. They have been sent here by the hostile Maduro regime in Venezuela, and the president, immediately upon taking office, designated TDA as a foreign terrorist organization. And under this act, it is within the president's authority to deport these terrorists. And anybody trying to defend these terrorists who have now been sent off of American soil should talk to the families of the individuals who these heinous monsters have killed and have raped. If you talk to those families, they are so heartened by the president's decision to take tough action and to use his executive authority, something that no other president has been willing to do, because President Trump does what he says he's going to do, and he is deporting these foreign terrorists from American soil to secure our homeland, and he's within his rights to do that. Jennifer.
Very quickly on Tesla, there's a website that's trying to dox Tesla owners across the country and saying they're only going to take down personal information when people show that they've sold their cars. What's the administration going to do about that?
I haven't seen that website, but we certainly think it's despicable, the violence that has taken place against Tesla, the company, its employees, and also just Americans who have chosen to drive an electric vehicle. Many of them are Democrats, by the way. Democrats were big supporters of Tesla and of electric vehicles until Elon Musk decided to vote for Donald Trump. So we would like Democrats to also come out and condemn this heinous violence that we have seen, and I believe the Attorney General has said she's investigating these incidents as acts of domestic terrorism. Jennifer.
On Ukraine, can you say, is the White House going to pause foreign military aid or intelligence sharing with Ukraine, as Russia says it's pushing for? And then I have a follow-up on the Federal Trade Commission.
Sure. When it comes to Ukraine, I do have a statement for you from the National Security Advisor and also the Secretary of State. First, I'd like to reiterate what the President said earlier following his call with President Zelensky this morning. He said he just completed a very good telephone call with President Zelensky. It lasted approximately 1 hour. Much of the discussion was based on the call made yesterday with President Putin in order to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. We are very much on track, and I will ask Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz to give an accurate description of the points discussed. That statement will be put out shortly. Well, I have that statement for you right here. Bear with me as I read it. Today, President Trump and Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky had a fantastic phone conversation. President Zelensky thanked President Trump for a productive start for the work of the Ukrainian and American teams in Jeddah on March 11th. The meeting of the senior officials from both nations significantly helped in moving toward ending the war. President Zelensky thanked President Trump for the support of the United States, especially the Javelin missiles that President Trump was first to provide and his efforts towards peace. The leaders agreed Ukraine and America will continue working together to bring about a real end to the war, and that lasting peace under President Trump's leadership can be achieved. President Trump fully briefed President Zelensky on his conversation with Putin and the key issues discussed. They reviewed the situation in Kursk and agreed to share information closely between their defense staffs as the battlefield situation evolved. President Zelensky asked for additional air defense systems to protect his civilians, particularly Patriot missile systems, and President Trump agreed to work with him to find what was available, particularly in Europe. The two leaders also agreed on a partial ceasefire against energy. Technical teams will meet in Saudi Arabia in the coming days to discuss broadening the ceasefire to the Black Sea on the way to a full ceasefire. They agreed this could be the first step toward the full end of the war and ensuring security. President Zelensky was grateful for the president's leadership in this effort and reiterated his willingness to adopt a full ceasefire. President Trump also discussed Ukraine's electrical supply and nuclear power plants. He said that the United States could be very helpful in running those plants with its electricity and utility expertise. American ownership of those plants would be the best protection for that infrastructure and support for Ukrainian energy infrastructure. President Zelensky also thanked President Trump for continuing to push humanitarian concerns, including the exchange of prisoners of war. He noted they had just had a successful exchange and thanked the president for his leadership on that. President Trump also asked President Zelensky about the children who had gone missing from Ukraine during the war, including the ones that had been abducted, and President Trump promised to work closely with both parties to help make sure those children were returned home. They agreed all parties must continue the effort to make a ceasefire work. The presidents noted the positive work of their advisors and representatives, especially Secretary Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, Special Envoy Kellogg, and others. The presidents instructed their teams to move ahead with the technical issues related to implementing and broadening the partial ceasefire. The presidents instructed their advisors and representatives to carry out this work as quickly as possible. The President emphasized that in further meetings, the teams can agree on all necessary aspects of advancing toward lasting peace and security. That is a lengthy statement that was just given to me, so thanks for bearing with me. Our office will, of course, provide this after. And as you know, as I just pointed out in the statement, the President's team of negotiators and national security experts will be heading to Saudi again later this week to continue working on and ironing out the details. But I would just like to emphasize we have never been this close to peace, and it's only because of President Trump that we are here. I think a couple of years ago, as you all reported on the war, it was incomprehensible to have a partial ceasefire in this conflict. And today that is true because of the leadership of this president.
So they agreed to closely share information between their defense staffs. Does that mean all intelligence sharing will continue? So the White House is rejecting Russia's request to pause.
Intelligence sharing in terms of defense for Ukraine will continue to be shared. Mary.
Thanks, Caroline. I have two questions. One on the United States Institute of Peace and then on the Supreme Court, if that's okay.
Sure.
So on the United States Institute of Peace, this is a little bit wild. I understand the old president refused to leave after he was removed from his position. He barricaded himself in his offices, had to be escorted out by police, left the building without Wi-Fi, telephones, elevators, and more, and is now telling media that Doge broke in and illegally removed him. So can you comment on this sequence of events and specify, did Doge illegally enter?
I'm really glad you brought this up, Mary. We were made aware of this story by individuals at Doge, at Elon Musk's team, and also at the State Department who were unable to access this building. And it became very clear that there was a concerted effort amongst the rogue bureaucrats at the United States Institute of Peace to actually physically barricade themselves essentially inside of the building to prevent political appointees of this administration who work at the direction of the President of the United States to get into the building. There was a piece in the Daily Caller, thank you for sharing the truth on this, about what happened. Staff contacted the MPD in an attempt to prevent Doge personnel from entering. They barricaded the doors. They also disabled telephone lines, internet connections, and other IT infrastructure within the building. They distributed flyers internally, encouraging each other to basically prevent these individuals from accessing the building. I use this to say this is what Doge and this administration is facing. It's a resistance from bureaucrats who don't want to see change in this city. President Trump was elected on an overwhelming mandate to seek change and implement change, and this is unacceptable behavior.
Thank you. And just really quick on the Supreme Court, I know it's been almost 3 years now since the leak of the draft Dobbs opinion to Politico, actually. A leak which sparked protesting outside the homes of the justices and even brought on one attempted assassination attempt. I know Justice Alito said that it made the justices targets for assassination, but yet the Supreme Court has not tracked down any leaker. Does the White House have interest in finding out who that leaker was, and can you comment on that at all?
I know generally speaking the president has an interest in finding leakers and he believes it's unacceptable, and it's the position of this administration. You've seen the Secretary of Homeland Security has taken tough action at her agency. Leaking is unacceptable to this president and to the leaders across the board in this cabinet, especially when it puts people in harm's way. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline. A mom whose daughter was forced to change in a locker room with a biological male at school filed a complaint with the DOJ. How will the Trump DOJ deal with violations of President Trump's orders protecting women and girls like this?
I would defer you to the Department of Justice on that specific case, but the president has made it incredibly clear that it is the policy of this administration that there are only two genders, male and female, only two sexes rather, male and female, and that we are not going to tolerate such behavior by men pretending to be women. The president will continue to strongly stand for the rights of women and girls, not just in sports and on athletic fields, but also in private spaces like locker rooms and bathrooms. Sure. Go ahead.
Thank you. On the FTC, two quick questions. Can you explain the president's thinking in his decision to fire the two Democratic commissioners, especially given that Mark Meadow is on track to be confirmed next week and there would be a Republican majority? My biggest question is why now?
Sure. Because the time was right to let these people go, and the president absolutely has the authority to do it, and they were given ample notice in a letter that I believe your outlet reported on, so it pretty much explains exactly why this administration chose to let those individuals go.
Is the ultimate goal to get this to the Supreme Court to try to overturn the 1935 precedent?
The goal was to let these individuals go. If we have to fight it all the way to the Supreme Court, we certainly will. Rachel.
Back to those deportation flights to El Salvador, can the administration provide any more details on how authorities determined that each of those men were in fact members of a gang? And if the White House can publish images, photos, videos of those men, why can't the administration just release basic information like their identities and names?
We are not going to reveal operational details about a counterterrorism operation, but what I can assure you, as I said on Monday, we have the highest degree of confidence in our ICE agents and our Customs and Border Patrol agents who have committed their lives to targeting illegal criminals in our country, particularly foreign terrorists, and they had great evidence and indication. They have the highest degree of professionalism, and they were 100% confident in the individuals that were sent home on these flights and in the president's executive authority to do that.
Follow up, I know in the last briefing you cited privacy concerns as a reason why the administration may not be able to reveal the identities. What exactly are the privacy rights of immigrants who were deported that the administration says were dangerous enough to be sent to El Salvador and sit in a prison?
Again, as I just said, we're not going to reveal the operational details of a counterterrorism operation for quite obvious reasons. We're trying to combat terrorism here in the United States of America. Jeff.
I could ask something else about the phone call yesterday. There was a couple different readouts from the Kremlin and the U.S. on a couple different points. One was energy and infrastructure. The U.S. statement said energy and infrastructure. The Kremlin said energy infrastructure. What is your understanding of what the actual substance of that disagreement was? Then I have one other question on that.
I would defer you to the readout that was provided by the White House. That's our understanding, and that's the truth.
And if I could ask a question about the judge as well. How does a president define a bad judge? Is it just someone who disagrees with him? And is that a dangerous precedent in this case, because this is a temporary ruling from Judge Boasberg that he could ultimately rule in your favor? Is he setting up a standard here for calling for the impeachment of a judge who may ultimately rule on your side?
No, it has nothing to do with disagreeing with the president on policy. It's with disagreeing with the Constitution and the law. And it's trying to usurp the authority of the executive branch of this country. It's having baseless reasoning for these injunctions. And it's a clear effort by these judges to slow roll this president's agenda. And if you just look at the injunctions that this president has faced, deporting foreign terrorists from our homeland, hiring and firing of executive branch employees, which when the president is the executive of the executive branch. You also see an injunction by a partisan activist judge when it comes to the Secretary of Defense trying to determine the readiness of our troops and the qualifications of our troops in our armed forces. Does a single district court judge really have more authority over the Commander-in-Chief and the Secretary of Defense to determine who should serve in our United States Armed Forces? Absolutely not. Anyone who has taken a basic civics lesson can understand that, and it's ridiculous lawfare that we are witnessing. And it's.
I'm sorry. The president said he respects the Chief Justice here. Does he respect him specifically on this case and this opinion, or respects him overall? And has he spoken to any other Supreme Court justices?
The president respects Chief Justice Roberts overall. He just expressed that to me in the Oval Office, but it's also quite clear that the Supreme Court needs to rein in these judges who are acting as partisan activists, and they are undermining the judicial branch, and it's a dereliction of duty on their behalf. Deanna, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Caroline. On the call with Zelensky, did they discuss the minerals deal at all? Is that back on the table, and what do the Ukrainians have to do to get that back on the table? And then one on the Russia call as well.
Again, I just provided a very lengthy readout of the call that was provided by the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor. And now we have moved beyond the economic minerals deal. We are at a place of peace. We're at a partial ceasefire, and we're moving towards a full ceasefire and a long-standing peace in this conflict. And that's great news for the American public.
Kremlin readout mentioned that Trump and Putin spoke about potential U.S.-Russia hockey games. And the Kremlin readout also said that Russia wanted the U.S. to stop U.S. intelligence and U.S. funding to Ukraine. The president has said that that conversation did not happen. Just wondering if you can get us any more clarity on that. And also, again, if it's energy infrastructure or if it's energy and infrastructure, because I think there is a big difference between that.
Again, as for the readouts of the call, I would defer you to ours. And when it comes to the topic of hockey, it did come up. However, we're more interested in securing a peace deal than scheduling hockey games right now. Sean.
Hey, about the deportation flight.
So was it the president himself who directed the planes to stay in the air? after the judge ordered them to turn back?
The president signed invoked the Aliens Enemies Act with a proclamation, which then directed the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of State to move forward with the plan of action. And as I said yesterday, all of the planes that were subject to the judge's written order took off before the order was submitted in court. I was asked and answered that question multiple times yesterday. Kate, go ahead.
Is the president still considering pressuring Russia with sanctions or tariffs to try to get a full ceasefire? And is there any kind of deadline or timeline that the White House has in mind for when that pressure might ramp up?
Again, the president had a nearly 2-hour-long call with President Putin yesterday. We provided a readout of that call, and we have his negotiating team heading to the Middle East this week to continue these discussions in regards to sanctions and any other details. I'm not going to give a readout of those from this podium.
And on TikTok, is Oracle the leading contender for a deal? And would the U.S. back a deal that keeps TikTok's algorithm and the underlying technology still in Chinese hands?
As President Trump does so well, we don't get ahead of ourselves when we are in the midst of the art of the deal. So when the president and this team are ready to announce a deal on TikTok, which is a high priority for the president, we will make that known. I've seen that reporting, but I'm not going to comment on it just yet. Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Press Secretary Levitt. Some prominent Trump supporters have been making the case that Derek Chauvin deserves a pardon. They argue that he did not receive a fair trial. Joe Biden and other Democrats actually implied that he was guilty while the trial was going on. BLM rioters had these jurors under immense threat and pressure. Mainstream media, frankly, many news outlets here today are complicit here. They chose to ignore the autopsy report. They chose to ignore the full body camera footage. They decided to slander Derek Chauvin as a racist cop instead. Does the administration believe Derek Chauvin received a fair trial, and will they consider a pardon moving forward?
The president has been asked and answered this question. He said it's not something he's considering at this time. Philip.
Thank you. 2 questions. First, just a follow-up on the readouts from those calls. When it comes to the discrepancies between the U.S. and Russian readout of that call between President Trump and Putin, is it the president's assessment that something is getting lost in translation, or does he believe that the Russians are trying to play games here?
Nope. The president believes in his team that put the readout out, and he also put his own out on Truth Social. We've been incredibly transparent about all of the president's calls with foreign leaders, and again, I would defer you to the readout.
And then following up
Michael.
on...
Thank you, Caroline. White House said yesterday that gas prices across the U.S. have fallen for the 4th straight week. 34 states now seeing gas under $3 a gallon. This limited ceasefire with Ukraine regarding oil refineries, energy, will that affect gas prices here in the U.S.?
Well, it's certainly the president's hope that gas prices will continue to fall, and he's working every single day to ensure that we do. As you just mentioned, there's been very encouraging data. Inflation is cooling and gas prices are falling. The president has established a National Energy Dominance Council, and it's ultimately the president's goal. And this administration is working hard on it every single day to increase our energy production right here in the United States of America, to have a Trump energy boom like we saw in our first term, which will not only lead to lower fuel prices here at home, but also lessen the rate of inflation that was created by the previous administration.
One more on Tesla, Caroline. Tim Walz, Governor Walz, saying last night he frequently checks Tesla stock boost during the day. How should Americans view politicians who take pride in the downfall of an American car company?
I think that's quite sad, but I think Governor Walz unfortunately is living a sad existence after his devastating defeat on November 5th. Reagan, go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline. Across the country, Tesla cars are being lit on fire, dealerships are being shot up, Molotov cocktails are being used. There was a website posted yesterday that shared the addresses of private Tesla owners and reportedly had Kash Patel's information on it. AG Gandhi has called this acts of domestic terrorism. Does the White House have any indication that this is some sort of coordinated movement or that it's being funded by some outside group? And do you know if the investigation by the DOJ is being investigated as incidents of organized terror?
I believe the Attorney General has made her comments clear on that. She is investigating these events as acts of domestic terrorism, and we fully condemn them. And as I said earlier to Jackie's question, we think it's despicable what is happening to not just this American company, but also their innocent employees. And again, innocent Americans who drive these vehicles. We condemn it wholeheartedly. Sure.
More than 24,000 workers in 18 agencies
are in the process of being reinstated. What is your message to these workers, and can you assure them they won't be fired again as the administration directs agencies to do more layoffs?
Well, the administration is complying with the court's order. Again, as I have spoken about repeatedly, we think it's despicable that we have judges acting as judicial activists, partisan activists, trying to dictate who the President of the United States, the executive of the executive branch, can hire and fire. We have never seen anything like this. We are fighting this in court, and we will continue to fight it all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to. And as for federal employees, it's been the very common sense position of this president and the administration that bureaucrats here in Washington, D.C. need to show up to the office just like the rest of America. Middle-class Americans, from doctors to business owners to teachers to law enforcement officers, have to show up to their offices every single day. And the president has made it a clear priority that people in this city have to do the same. And we are also continue to be committed to reducing the scale of our workforce and to reducing the size of our federal bureaucracy here in Washington, D.C. to save taxpayers' money. Annie, go ahead.
Thanks so much. In the statement that you read, you referenced the president's interest in helping return Ukrainian children to their parents and to their families. There's an organization that provides intel and information about those children that their aid has been cut. It's a Yale University program that used foreign aid. And I'm curious if, as part of this new thinking with Ukraine, that aid might be unfrozen.
I have no updates about that or that specific program at this time. Karen.
Follow up on your answer to the question on the minerals deal. You said that the White House has moved beyond the minerals deal. What does that mean? Is that no longer on the table?
Nope. It means the minerals deal was that first set of framework that you all saw in that very public meeting with President Zelensky and President Trump in the Oval Office. We are now focused on a long-term peace agreement. As you know, on that deal, or that meeting between President Zelensky and President Trump, the Ukrainian president at the time wasn't talking about a greater peace deal. We are now at that place where we are talking about that. So we've moved beyond just the economic minerals deal framework, and we're looking at a lasting ceasefire. Right now we're at a partial ceasefire, but again, the president is sending his highly skilled, intelligent, and experienced team to Saudi Arabia later this week to continue fighting for peace in this conflict. And I would just reiterate one more time, we have never been closer to peace than we are today. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you later.
How are you?
I'm here and there. Thank you.
Can we also ask you a question?
A magyar álláspontot a parlament rögzítette, hogy Magyarország továbbra is támogatja, hogy Európa önállóan is képes legyen megvédeni a saját biztonságát. Ezért az európai biztonság érdekében való fegyverkezést is támogatjuk. A kérdés az, hogy honnan lesz erre pénz. A mi javaslatunk az, hogy mindenki tegye be a saját kasszájából a szükséges pénzt. Ne pedig az Unió közös hitelfelvételéből állítsuk elő a szükséges forrásokat. Nem akarunk senkivel sem közös adósságba keveredni. Azt akarjuk, hogy ha segíteni akar valaki, akkor tegye be a pénzt a közös európai biztonsági alapba. Mi erre készen állunk egyébként, a magyar költségvetés erre képes. A másik kérdés az Ukrajna Európai Uniós tagsága lesz holnap, ahol ezt sürgetni akarják, mi ezt a leghatározottabban ellenezzük. A háború az elmúlt 3 évben családokra lebontva, háztartásokra lebontva mindenkinek belekerült 2,5 millió forintjába. Egy ukrán csatlakozásnak a közvetlen költsége csak, ami azonnal jelentkezne, az első évben már 500 000 forint lenne családonként. Ezt mi nem akarjuk vállalni, úgyhogy ki fogunk tartani a saját álláspontunk mellett.
Miniszterelnök úr nagy csatára számít holnap?
Itt sosem kicsi. 27-en vagyunk.
De itt mindenki arra készül, hogy 26-21 lesz a vége.
Egy magyarnak az nem rossz arány.
A 2025-29-es jogalkotás kapcsán különös tekintettel a migrációra mire számít, miniszterelnök úr?
Hát holnap 11-kor kezdődik itt a csúcs, előtte összegyűlnek a rebellisek, 10 órakor azok a miniszterelnökök, akik nem értenek egyet a mostani migrációs politikával is.
Can we ask you a question?
Please. Az olaszok vezetik végig.
About Hungarian no to more money, billions, European Union to Ukraine. Will you still be against it?
Yeah, we don't support it because in our understanding there is one simple mission to be done by the European Union to support Donald Trump, President Donald Trump efforts to make peace. That's what we should do, nothing more.
Do you trust Donald Trump to make the peace?
Is there anybody in the globe who is able to manage a peace now? He's the President of the United States.
But how come your colleagues, for example, our Prime Minister in the Netherlands, the Big Stove, they don't really trust it?
You know, but I have to represent the opinion of my own nation, and the Hungarians are still very strongly believe that we have to target all our efforts and capacity to make peace as soon as we can. First of all, because of the very much Christian reason, because we are losing lives daily, thousands, which is totally against our values. And second, economically as well, because the war is very, very expensive. We have a calculation what was the price paid by the Hungarian families in the last 3 years just because of the war, creating a higher energy price. The bonds, the interest rates went up, and we lost many export possibilities in Russia. Altogether, we lost huge amount of money per family in Hungary. So I would not like to continue that. If now, luckily enough, we have a leader, I mean President Trump, who takes the responsibility to launch for peace negotiations, let's support him. That's all what we need.
A last question about a new law against the Budapest. Someone's falling. A light is falling. A new law in Hungary that is forbidding the Budapest Pride March. Why is that?
We are not there yet at this moment. What we have done now, we changed the constitution saying that the basic rights of the kids to have the proper growing up and education is the most important value, which is well ahead of all the other basic rights of the citizens of Hungary. So that's what we have done, which could be a basis to ban anything which is against the interest of the children. So what we are doing is to protect our children. This is the target.
And then the Budapest March, Pride March, is not allowed?
Yeah. Nobody would like to, nobody asks at this moment in favor of that. If the organizers would like to have it, they should come to the authorities as in any normal cases and ask for it, and then the authorities will give an answer.
But when will you be arrested, when you are taking part of that march?
No. We are a nice country. We don't, we don't arrest anybody. No. But of course you have to pay. Of course, if you are against the law, you transgress the law, you have to pay.
But you have to pay a fine.
Yeah.
And when exactly?
No. I don't know, because you know this whole story is just a speculation. What could be the consequences of the modification of the constitution we have done just a day ago? So you are running too much ahead. Thank you.
İstanbul Büyükşehir Belediye Başkanımız, Cumhurbaşkanı seçim adayımız Sayın Ekrem İmamoğlu'nun kıymetli ailesi sizleri sevgiyle, saygıyla selamlıyor.
Bonsoir. Que pensez-vous les nouveautés de Trump concernant le champagne, le vin de France?
C'est extrêmement ennuyeux. Surtout que, comme d'habitude, l'agriculture française paye les conséquences de la protection d'autres produits, Je veux dire, c'est comme dans les accords de libre-échange. Dans les accords de libre-échange, pour pouvoir vendre des voitures allemandes, on sacrifie l'agriculture française. Et là, on sanctionne l'agriculture française à raison de la volonté de protéger les exportations d'acier qui sont de mémoire allemands et néerlandais. Voilà. Donc on est un peu on voit un petit peu l'ambiguïté de cette politique menée par l'Union européenne, ce qui nous pose un véritable problème parce que le secteur des vins et des spiritueux français pourrait mourir de la mise en œuvre de taxes aussi importantes. J'y étais pas, excusez-moi, mais je n'étais pas présente lors de ce coup de téléphone. Ce que je sais, c'est que je ne peux que me réjouir lorsque des dirigeants se mettent autour d'une table pour parler de la paix. Surtout quand le président français, lui, ne cesse de parler de la guerre. Voilà. Donc j'espère que ceux qui parlent de la paix arriveront à conclure avant ceux qui parlent de la guerre.
Madame Le Pen, qu'est-ce que vous croyez de la position du président Macron concernant force européenne spéciale en Ukraine?
J'attends d'avoir des précisions sur ce sujet, mais je ne vois pas sous quel mandat. Si vous voulez, j'ai du mal à comprendre quel est le mandat qui serait celui de forces militaires qui seraient présentes à une frontière. Il me semble, moi, que le seul mandat possible, en tout cas le seul que nous pourrions accepter, serait un mandat de l'ONU en qualité de casque bleu. Mais ça n'est pas, semble-t-il, le choix d'Emmanuel Macron, mais il a le temps de changer d'avis 18 fois.
Okay, mais le support de l'OTAN, c'est obligatoire pour vous?
Non, pas obligatoirement. Le support de l'OTAN n'est pas obligatoire. Je crois même que l'OTAN ne devrait pas participer à la conférence de paix que je réclame depuis maintenant plus de 2 ans et qui verrait autour de la table l'ensemble des représentants des pays qui sont intéressés à la résolution de ce conflit. À mon sens, les Nations Unies devraient y être présentes, l'OTAN et l'Union Européenne devraient en être absents. Merci beaucoup.
Bugün gözaltında olan 86 milyonun daha huzurlu, daha mutlu, adil ve demokratik bir Türkiye Cumhuriyeti umududur. Ben Dilek İmamoğlu olarak buradan size söz veriyorum. Asla yılmayacağız. Asla pes etmeyeceğiz. Birbirimize kenetlenerek, çoğalarak yolumuza pes etmeden devam edeceğiz. Güzel vatanımıza, atamızın bize emanet ettiği güzel cumhuriyetimize el ele verip birlikte sahip çıkacağız. Hepinizden rica ediyorum. Bu büyük kumpas operasyonumuzda yanımızda olun. Her zaman birlikte olmaya devam edelim. Alnımız ak, başımız dik. Kabullenmiyoruz. Bunca suçu, bunca suçlamaları, adaletsizlikleri, hukuksuzlukları kabullenmiyoruz. Kabullenmeyin. Kabullenirsek demokrasi ölür. İktidarın rakiplerini belirlediği gün demokrasimizin öldüğü gündür. alet etti. Bir çift mavi gözden aldığımız ilhamla, mücadele ruhumuzla asla sönmeyecek. Bir çift mavi gözden aldığımız ilhamla mücadele ruhumuz asla sönmeyecek. Sevdamız bu ülke, bu güzel ülke. Sevdamız bu güzel cumhuriyet. Sevdamız atamızın izinde yılmadan, korkmadan
les menaces du président Trump de protéger les intérêts américains par ses tarifs douaniers et en même temps par une politique commerciale extrêmement agressive de la part de la Chine. Et ce que je déplore, moi, c'est l'incapacité de la France à exister sur la scène internationale et à dialoguer avec les grandes puissances de ce monde. Au moment où on se parle, le gouvernement français et le président de la République, Emmanuel Macron, devraient être en train de dialoguer avec à la fois les représentants chinois et américains pour se mettre autour de la table et trouver une solution. Or, tout cela n'est pas fait et je pense que l'Europe doit aussi maintenant penser à ses intérêts. C'est aussi pour ça que nous sommes là ce soir, c'est aussi de cela dont nous allons discuter. Il faut en même temps que l'Europe arrête la naïveté commerciale et soit capable de se protéger et que dans le même temps, nous menions une politique qui soit favorable aux entreprises, une politique en faveur de la compétitivité pour déverrouiller aujourd'hui toutes les contraintes qui pèsent sur la croissance, à commencer par le Green Deal et les contraintes posées par le pacte vert aux entreprises européennes.
Vous trouvez que le coup de fil entre Donald Trump et Vladimir Poutine allait dans le bon sens ou pas ?
Je pense que toute initiative de discussion et de dialogue va évidemment dans le bon sens. 2025, ça doit être l'année de la paix. Ça fait 3 ans que cette guerre dure. Elle a fait déjà plus d'1 million de victimes, morts et blessés. Il y a 1300 pertes chaque jour du côté russe, 1300 pertes chaque jour du côté ukrainien. Et il faut maintenant que le cessez-le-feu soit engagé et qu'on puisse se mettre autour d'une table pour discuter. Et je pense que les Occidentaux doivent arriver aussi unis face à la Fédération de Russie, de manière à pouvoir non seulement négocier la paix, mais aussi apporter des garanties de sécurité à l'Ukraine qui sont nécessaires.
Votre allié Viktor Orban veut interdire la Gay Pride dans son pays. Qu'en pensez-vous ?
C'est la décision souveraine du Parlement hongrois. Je n'ai pas de commentaire à faire particulière sur ce sujet. On peut avoir des conceptions très différentes d'un État à l'autre. Ce qui est essentiel, c'est qu'on travaille ensemble au changement de fonctionnement de l'Union européenne. On s'accorde sur un certain nombre de sujets, et notamment sur la question de l'immigration, sur la question du Green Deal pour la compétitivité de nos entreprises. Après, chaque État est souverain et chaque Parlement légifère et débat en fonction des intérêts qui sont ceux de son État.
Sur l'immigration, il y a un certain nombre de mesures qui sont annoncées, peut-être même l'ouverture d'un cadre légal pour des centres à l'extérieur de l'Union européenne. Est-ce que c'est pour vous une mesure intéressante ?
Je pense que les demandes d'asile doivent être traitées à l'étranger et qu'ils doivent être traités dans les ambassades et consulats des pays de départ. Donc il y a une initiative, une tentation au sein des institutions européennes de prendre en compte cette considération migratoire. En tout cas, nous on sera là pour la défendre au Parlement.
Secretary Rubio made clear yesterday, Venezuela is obligated to accept its repatriated citizens from the United States. This is not an issue for debate or negotiation, nor does it merit any reward. Unless the Maduro regime accepts a consistent flow of deportation flights, without further excuses or delays, the U.S. will impose new, severe, and escalating sanctions. As President Trump made clear in his proclamation, TDA is closely associated, closely aligned with, and indeed has infiltrated the Maduro regime. Maduro maintains close ties to regime-sponsored narco-terrorists. The Maduro regime must accept back all Venezuelan aliens deported by the United States, especially their murderers, rapists, criminals, human traffickers, and other illegally present criminals in the United States. End of discussion. We will impose new and more severe sanctions upon any failure to do so or delays. Let me be clear, the United States government will enforce the laws of the United States We will deport illegal aliens from our country, and we will have made clear that we expect countries to accept their nationals illegally present in the United States. We thank our partners in our region and around the world who are partnering with us to stop illegal immigration and combat vicious transnational crime. These efforts help all of us by making our entire region safer and more secure. On the Russia-Ukraine conflict, President Trump spoke with President Putin yesterday. As President Trump said, it was a good and productive phone conversation. Both President Trump and President Putin agreed on the need for this conflict to end with a lasting peace. They agreed, quote, the movement to peace will begin with an energy and infrastructure ceasefire, as well as technical negotiations on implementation of a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea, full ceasefire and permanent peace. Today, President Trump spoke with President Zelensky. As President Trump said, it was, quote, a very good telephone call, with much of the discussion based on the call made yesterday with President Putin in order to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. In addition to these conversations, everybody's talking. Special Envoy Witkoff met with Putin last week. Last weekend, Secretary Rubio spoke with Foreign Minister Lavrov. And, of course, Secretary Rubio and National Security Advisor Waltz met with the Ukrainian delegation in Jeddah. Negotiations will continue in Saudi Arabia in the coming days. On reports of Russian strikes on civilian infrastructure overnight, attacks like these are precisely why President Trump is committed to peace. It is time for the death and destruction to stop and for an end to this senseless war. As Secretary Rubio has said, there is no military solution to this war. All sides need to move to a ceasefire. President Trump has made this clear as well. We cannot get to the table for negotiations to end the war without a ceasefire in place. The shooting has to stop first. Finally, we'd like to welcome home the NASA astronauts, Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams, which, of course, we all watched yesterday. It was a remarkable scene with the dolphins that greeted them in the ocean also getting their own time on television. It was a fabulous event, and it reminded us about the nature of the 21st century, the modern age, and how progress continues. Now, you also have, that's the opening here of what I've seen, of course, over the last 24, 48 hours. Of course, there's always something that feels like it should have been a month of news that is happening on a daily basis. But we also have a direct statement, which I'm going to read to you as well, and to those who are watching from home or from their offices and from around the world, a statement from Secretary Rubio and the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. And this also directly addresses some issues that we're expecting to come up, certainly in the next week, and the nature of where things stand at this point. And so here is that statement from the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor. Today, President Donald J. Trump and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky had a fantastic phone conversation. President Zelensky thanked President Trump for a productive start for the work of the Ukrainian and American teams in Jeddah on March 11th. The meeting of the senior officials from both nations significantly helped in moving toward ending the war. President Zelensky thanked President Trump for the support of the United States, especially the Javelin missiles that President Trump was first to provide, and his efforts towards peace. The leaders agreed Ukraine and America will continue working together to bring about a real end to the war, and that lasting peace under President Trump's leadership can be achieved. President Trump fully briefed President Zelensky on his conversation with Russian President Putin and the key issues discussed. They reviewed the situation in Kursk and agreed to share information closely between their defense staffs in the battlefield situation as the battlefield situation evolved. President Zelensky asked for additional air defense systems to protect his civilians, particularly Patriot missile systems. President Trump agreed to work with him to find what was available, particularly in Europe. The two leaders also agreed on a partial ceasefire against energy. The technical teams will meet in Saudi Arabia in the coming days to discuss broadening the ceasefire to the Black Sea on the way to a full ceasefire. They agreed this could be the first step toward the full end of the war and ensuring security. So let me just remind you here, that is technical teams. It will not be principals going to those negotiations. President Zelensky was grateful for the president's leadership in this effort and reiterated his willingness to adopt a full ceasefire. President Trump also discussed Ukraine's electrical supply and nuclear power plants. He said that the United States could be very helpful in running those plants with its electricity and utility expertise. American ownership of those plants would be the best protection for that infrastructure and support for the Ukrainian energy infrastructure. President Zelensky also thanked President Trump for continuing to push humanitarian concerns, including the exchange of POWs. He noted that they had just had a successful exchange and thanked the president for his leadership. President Trump also asked President Zelensky about the children who have gone missing from Ukraine during the war, including the ones that had been abducted. President Trump promised to work closely with both parties to help make sure those children were returned home. They agreed all parties must continue the effort to make a ceasefire work. The presidents noted the positive work of their advisors and representatives, especially Secretary Rubio, National Security Advisor Waltz, Special Envoy Kellogg, and others. The presidents instructed their teams to move ahead with the technical issues related to implementing and broadening the partial ceasefire. The presidents instructed their advisors and representatives to carry out this work as quickly as possible. The presidents emphasized that in further meetings, the teams can agree on all necessary aspects of advancing toward lasting peace and security. So we are closer to peace than, of course, we have been at any other point. But still, I know you might have some questions. I don't know why. And I'm here to answer those questions. Matt?
Thank you, Tammy. Can I just start with, since you opened with Venezuela, and this can be a very simple yes or no answer, did you get an answer to the question I asked on Monday about whether using the AEA for these deportations means that you recognize Maduro's government and that he is him as the legitimate leader of Venezuela?
I do have an answer to that.
You do? Okay.
And the answer is no.
No, okay.
The answer is no. There is clearly, we've made it clear, and it's been obvious for quite some time, that Maduro is a dictator. It is a regime that we do not recognize. And we also understand, of course, that what we demand of him is something that has got to happen. I made that clear in my topper. The AEA proclamation is still valid, of course. That is currently being challenged in court, so I'm not going to comment on that litigation. But at the same time, it's not a regime we recognize. We don't recognize him as the president or a legitimate ruler at all.
Okay.
Right.
Secondly, then, and again, these are going to be extremely brief. On Friday, the Secretary signed, along with Pete Hegseth and the head of the National Defense University, this order removing the head of USIP.
That's the Institute for Peace.
Yes.
Yes.
Correct. I'm curious to know when and where the Secretary signed this.
Well, it's been signed. And I don't have the details of exactly where he was. He was in many places in the 21st century.
But we were with him. Both
yes,
of us.
we weren't with him. We were on an airplane, and he was in the giant Secretary of State area that is away from us. He wasn't with you. He wasn't. Yeah, but there's plenty of ways in which something can be signed.
Fine,
and
can you assure us that it was his signature was not done by auto pen?
I've never known him to do that.
Okay.
But what I can tell you is that it was signed.
Okay.
It was signed. Yes, sir.
Next
All right.
one-
So
next
this
one
is like the Matt Lee show.
Well, no.
Yes,
It's not
Daphne.
trying to-
Daphne, we can
yes
come.
or no question.
Are we
Yes
staying
or
in the
no
same
answer.
region?
Do you have
though?
anything? Can you tell us anything about Pete Morocco and his move from USAID?
Well, Pete Morocco is returning to the State Department full-time as the Director of Foreign Assistance. An indispensable role in aligning all U.S. government foreign assistance with the President's priorities. So he is returning to that job, and you will, I'm sure, no doubt, be hearing from him in a variety of different ways.
Okay. And
All right,
then
now
last
Daphne
one-
and
hold
Matt,
on.
that's it.
Tammy,
Daphne, let's go.
Tammy.
No, excuse me.
All
Three
right,
questions.
fine.
Daphne.
Thank you. So the White House has said that it has moved beyond the U.S.-Ukraine minerals deal. Has that already been agreed to and signed?
Well, what I know is, and you've noted their comment, is that at this point we're dealing with a whole host of things. That is not something that is being addressed at this moment, so I can't say what the disposition is, but I would just refer you to how they commented on it.
And could I just follow up on what you said about negotiations continuing in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
Who will be representing the U.S. in these talks between the technical teams with Russia?
Well, it'll be senior staff. That's all I can tell you. So it will not be principals. It'll be senior staff addressing technical frameworks. And of course, the timing is important. It'll be in the coming days. So when they said it would be quickly, as President Trump requested, it's happening quickly. And we'll see some results of that, I think, very soon. Yes.
Just to follow up on that, Tammy, these technical talks, are they bilateral, trilateral? What is the format here? Are all of the parties going to be in one room?
I think that's probably still being discussed or arranged, and so I can't really speak about the nature of the specifics of the arrangement, but it's enough to be able to work on, technically draw up and deal with the nature of what was agreed upon in the call between the two presidents, and there'll be people there who will be able to do that.
And then on the issue of the abducted children,
Yes.
this was brought up in the Zelensky call according to that statement, but the administration has cut off the funding for the research into the abduction of these children, some 30,000, and there's reports that the data collected on these children could have possibly been deleted. Do you have any comment on the decision to terminate the funding and the whereabouts of the data?
Well, the funding has been cut based on the assessments that we've been making regarding a whole host of funding, if it worked within our framework of what was in America's interest. What I can tell you, though, is also that the conspiracy theory or the fear or whatever it was about data being deleted is untrue. So that is false. The data exists. It was not in the State Department's control. It was the people running that framework, but we know who is running the data and the website, and we know fully that the data exists, and it's not been deleted and it's not missing. So that's the good news.
Why is it
Yes,
not in
Michael.
America's interest to track?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Michael.
Tammy, you referred early on in your opening about a ceasefire would apply to energy and infrastructure. Yeah. The statement says agrees on a partial ceasefire against energy. It doesn't say anything about other types of infrastructure. Can you explain what specifically the partial ceasefire covers? And when it says energy, what does that mean specifically? Does it mean the electrical grid? Does it mean power plants? What really is covered by this ceasefire?
I think when we have technical teams moving to an area within days to discuss the technical aspects, we'll get those answers. But one thing that is clear is that, as I've noted, we've never been closer to the full ceasefire. As Envoy Witkoff noted last night, that it is just a short way away to a complete ceasefire. That is clearly the goal. The goal has been a ceasefire within which we can begin negotiations for peace itself. That has not changed. So this is, of course, as we know, this is an agreement. This agreement reflects us being closer to an end to this, and is really the first agreement that has created the potential of a de-escalation, which is what we want, and of course closer as a result to a full ceasefire so that this can end. The conversations between the parties involved, President Trump, the Secretary Rubio, Waltz, Witkoff, Kellogg, etc., multiple conversations to all the parties involved, and they've actually moved to the table in this regard through shuttle diplomacy, and so we've never been closer. So at this point, when it comes to the technical understanding, we'll learn that certainly in a few days, but this is the right trajectory brought to you by President Trump and his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Nadia.
Thank you, Tammy. Do you believe that diplomacy is still the best option to deal with Iran? Considering some reports that maybe the president is giving them 2 months only, other options are still on the table. And on Gaza, while Israel is going after Hamas, there is reported of 400 people being killed, the majority are civilians, including 185 children. What is the United States doing to tell Israel to spare the life of civilians, or to avoid them at least?
Well, first of all, on the question of Iran, it's been clear, Secretary Rubio has made it clear that, of course, as the world's top diplomat, that diplomacy matters. We continue. Diplomacy includes, of course, there's a whole host of things in the toolbox for diplomacy, and the world understands this as well. So, of course, yes, diplomacy is the best way to handle this situation. Regarding, was it about
the
Gaza?
civilian casualties in Gaza, including 108 children, have been killed.
Yeah, it's horrible. This entire, it's the 21st century, and the savagery unleashed by terrorist groups, death squads of Iran, entities that have an investment in the suffering never ending, the use of people, the Gazans in particular, as cannon fodder for a dynamic that the world has decried for decades. And finally, we are here and we've had enough of a conversation within the framework of this needing to end. And at the start, President Trump and Secretary Rubio demanded a new way of looking at how we end this framework of death and destruction, this cycle. And we are still in that process. And their demand that we can't continue on is made clear by the fact that Hamas had an offer, a bridge to continue on to the second phase, which they rejected. It was not a dynamic that was clearly going to end well in their rejecting it, but they did so anyway. And it's a horrible result of more decisions by Hamas that continue the suffering. But that has been the history. And so we not only decry the loss of life and the impact on children around the world, but enough to where President Trump has one term, and his focus has clearly been peace on this planet in every single fashion. And it will essentially be able to work because he's known to get results, he's known to be serious, and we're seeing it move forward. So it's a shame that Hamas has allowed this to occur, but look nowhere else other than the people who have facilitated this suffering from the beginning. The Trump administration, Secretary Rubio, the Department of State of this country are determined and are the ones working to make sure that this stops. And certainly the region understands that this is a real opportunity finally to change what's been happening in the world. Yes, sir.
Tammy, can I?
Yes, staying in this region, please.
I was just wondering if Secretary Rubio had any conversations since the strikes with his Israeli counterparts, and are you trying to ensure that when Israel does these strikes using U.S. weapons that they're targeting, being as careful as possible in their targeting?
I can tell you that, of course, our teams, they're constantly in touch. There's been no phone call arranged yet, direct phone call between Secretary Rubio and Israeli counterparts or Israeli leadership. But of course, this is not a situation where if it's out of the news, the teams working to change the environment stop and leave an office or stop and just do something else. So this is a constant, as you might imagine, a constant effort on every element of foreign policy, certainly when it comes to war, ceasefires, ending conflict. So they're constantly working, and certainly we want peace, and we're working for this because we deplore the loss of life, as do the Israelis. These are things that are happening that none of us want to continue, and so it's difficult, but those conversations are ongoing. And of course, we stand with Israel in every circumstance. They are our ally, and we continue to work to make sure that this conflict that we're able to stop it. Yes, Saeed, please.
Thank you, Tammy. I mean, just to follow up on Nadia's question, there were 180 Palestinian children that were killed and so on. And my question to you that, Israel has used like 100 fighter jets supplied by the United States of America. There's absolutely no ground-to-air defenses in Gaza, so there was no response whatsoever. And that, hence the quest for restraint and so on, that the U.S. probably should ask Israel. On the issue, the humanitarian issue, it's not only the bombing. I mean, there was a humanitarian catastrophe to begin with the holding of the aid and so on, and now we have this situation. Is the United States concerned that there is a looming catastrophe, probably of apocalyptic, nature coming through?
The actions of the world against what's happening make it clear that we are going to get this to be stopped. What I can tell you is it is a catastrophe, and there was a ceasefire on October 7th, I should say. There was a ceasefire, and it was broken by, you want apocalyptic, by the massacre of 1,200 people, the taking of over 250 hostages, remaining hostages that still are in unknown conditions. Certainly, Idan Alexander deserves to be free, and he still is not. So when we think about why we're in this situation, let us not forget. We talk about never forgetting certain things that happen, and it's important to keep reminding people of the things what sparked this, the obscenity of October 7th, the obscenity of this wholesale massacre that was videotaped, involving the slaughter of children, of babies, of women being raped as then they're murdered while they're being raped in front of some things are so difficult we choose to not think about them or hold them in our consciousness because we can't. But in this situation, it is a mistake to look at dynamics within a section of what has occurred and remember the history of what has led us here and the extraordinary surprise at the American approach, the Trump approach, to try something new because this can't continue as a civilized world. It can't continue. So yes, we decry everything that is going on, which is why we're doing what we're doing now.
A quick follow-up.
All right. Yes, sir.
I just want to follow up there on the material point about, the State Department is bound by the Leahy laws and other laws of the United States when it supplies weapons to its ally Israel. The point has been made that over half of these casualties, or those killed, were women and children. So is there a process underway in this building to assess if those actions using American weapons were compliant with international law?
Well, what we do, we work and apply international law. We apply certainly our applicable U.S. laws, I should say. And that is something, of course, that we are committed to. That's what we ask of others to do, and that's what we're doing. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
It's okay if I shift regions.
I'm sorry?
Can I shift away?
Are we going to shift regions? You have a few more questions here. I will come right back to you. There. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Tammy. A couple questions. Number one, on the Israel-Hamas unraveling of the ceasefire. I understand the U.S.'s position. What about the actual plan? The first time around, there was an immense political investment made in garnering a ceasefire. Is the U.S. planning through the State Department again to invest that much political capital in getting a ceasefire back in place? And if so, is the route the first time to pressure Prime Minister Netanyahu? Is it now to pressure Qatar to lean on Hamas? What is the plan of action here?
Well, first, I'm not going to discuss negotiations or diplomatic conversations or plans that might be emerging or not. What we do know, and I think has been very public, is the fact that President Trump is not just wanting a peaceful day or a peaceful week. Secretary Rubio is not flying around to speak with his counterparts, to handle summits and speaking with the parties involved so that we can have a peaceful fortnight. This is over. It is over. The people, all of us are subjected, certainly not as much as the people on the ground in the Middle East. But the world has to be done with this situation. So the commitment, we would, with the nature of what President Trump has already been able to create in his first term, in his personal life, the nature of the commitment of Secretary Rubio, that we have got an understanding of enough of a history of knowing what has happened, that we know it has to be handled differently. The region understands this, and the Trump administration we have this window of this administration to change the trajectory of what has been decades and decades, coming up on 100 years of carnage that is now unacceptable. So if it's going to be done, everything that is necessary to get it done will be delivered by President Trump.
One other question for Karen.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Tammy. I have two questions, and Russia, North Korea, and South Korea. First question, South Korea. It was revealed that the former Biden administration classified South Korea as a sensitive country in the Department of Energy in January 2025. What is the specific reason for classifying South Korea as a sensitive country, and what is the Trump administration's stance on allies? And
all right, so let me answer that. Is that, in fact, I have to refer you to the Department of Energy, all right? So that's the Department of Energy designation.
Okay.
And also, obviously, I'll reiterate, is that the United States greatly values the close relationship we have with the Republic of Korea on scientific research collaboration, and we look forward to continued robust cooperation. So that's my answer there, and I promised you I would come to you.
Can I have one more Russian deputy?
Do you want to cede?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe I ask and then you go back.
All right, well, let's do that. All right, go ahead. I'll be back with you. Sure.
Since we're off the region anyway.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to ask about the case of this missing spring breaker in the Dominican Republic who's feared to have drowned. Authorities in the country have effectively detained an American college student who's a witness in the case by withholding his passport. Is the State Department working to bring him home?
Well, you're talking about Joshua Ribe, if I'm saying his last name right, yes. So we, and I say this often, and we'll probably be saying it a lot more, is that there is no higher priority than the safety and security of U.S. citizens who are overseas. That matters to us. We're aware of this situation, certainly, and we take seriously our commitment to assist U.S. citizens abroad. It is a situation where I can't discuss certainly specifics, but we know that the U.S. Embassy is in communication with him and his family and his lawyer, and we are providing consular assistance as well. So that's where I have to set it, and I hope that answers the question. Is that right? All right, we'll go back here.
Thank you again.
So about Russia, yes?
Yes, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Rudenko visited North Korea last weekend and discussed the war in Ukraine with North Korean Kim Jong-un. How does the Trump administration concerns about the military cooperation between Russia and North Korea, but the Russians, they still want to remain the North Korean troops in Russia, Moscow? Thank you.
Right, so asking about the nature of our reaction to Russia and North Korea and their alliance, essentially. So we know, of course, that's a perfect example of how third countries, like the DPRK, have perpetuated this war. So this is a dynamic that other countries are involved in, and certainly very specifically the DPRK. And they bear responsibility for the nature of what's going on. We continue to be concerned about their direct involvement in the war, their military deployment to Russia, and any support provided by the Russian Federation to North Korea in return also must end. So they're realizing the situation is changing, and that's good news, but we certainly, I think it's been made very clear the difference.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Following up on the Ukrainian children and the grant that you confirmed has been terminated to the research initiative at Yale University. Does the Trump administration and the State Department believe that it is in the interest of the United States and the American people to support initiatives like that one that has been gathering evidence on Moscow's abduction of Ukrainian children? And you mentioned that Trump had spoken to Zelensky about this, and he had said he would work closely with both parties to make sure that those Ukrainian children are returned home. Are you saying that this administration and this department are going to help find other initiatives or support other initiatives to help find and bring back those Ukrainian children?
Well, as our review began when it came to foreign aid, I cautioned everyone to not associate buildings or an infrastructure or the existing status quo as being the only way possible to achieve our goals. And that includes foreign aid. We were, of course, reminded that while certain things were being cut, it didn't mean we were stepping away from foreign aid. It's about stepping away from abuse and a waste of money and an infrastructure and a bureaucracy that ends up taking the finances that exist, and us needing to have finally an even playing field to determine what's been working, what isn't working, how to start again without an infrastructure that's going to take a majority of the funding in order to breathe life into itself, so that we can actually spend money and do work that gets directly to the heart of the matter and saves people's lives, gets them life-saving assistance that is aligned, as those things are, with the American point of view and the American
was abusing funds.
Well, I know that it was cut, and it was cut and the things that have been cut were not assessed to be within the framework of what mattered to this administration on the issue of making America safe and secure or more prosperous, but also it's an issue about waste and abuse. So when we think about a particular effort, it's important to realize that it's the goal that we need to address versus a particular structure that might be happening. So when we have a funded grant at a university that might be cut because it's been determined that it needed to be cut, and then you've got the presidents of the nations involved in the issue talking about it personally on the phone, the president of the most powerful country in the world saying, I'm going to do something here. We're going to work on this. I think that's a pretty good, clear indication that we can still work on issues that matter and make them happen without it being in a certain structure that has existed. So I think that's pretty clear. It was very important for President Trump's comments to President Zelensky on that matter. Yes, sure. Sean.
Can I go back to the issue of cuts in U.S. government-funded media?
Sure.
Radio Marti, the Secretary has long been supportive of that. It's broadcasting into Cuba. Does the Secretary support the elimination of Radio Marti?
I have not spoken to him about the specifics of the nature of these particular programs. But what I said on Monday is I'll repeat here, is that the American sensibility we value and have talked about, and it matters to us, the issue of people's voices being heard, the issue of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and the ability, I think the desire and the ability to do that is always a priority when it comes to how we spread the word of democracy and want to improve the quality of people's lives. How that happens might change over time. And I think that's, again, bringing us back to the fact that we've gotten used to a certain infrastructure, but how we apply the values that we hold may change. And so I will ask him, we'll take that back as a specific question for the Secretary. That is something that I think is important, and I'll find out for you. But what I do know is that his #1 priority is to make sure this nation is safe financially, that Americans are safe, that we are secure within this world, and that's going to be part of, I think, the transition that happens. Yes, sir.
Going back to Ukraine talks, if I may. The Secretary last week met with Ukrainian colleagues, and he discussed full ceasefire deal. And he gave a press conference, the latest one I think was in Canada, where he said that, when we're going to talk to Russian leadership, we will know if they say no, I'm going to quote the Secretary, it will tell us a lot about their goals and what their goals are and what their mindset is. There are concerns that, with current achievement that you have, Russia might be using these negotiations to accelerate victory, to weaken Ukraine, to strengthen itself. Energy, infrastructure deal or ceasefire will help Russia more than Ukraine. Because right now winter is over.
There's lots of conversations that we have that are suppositions and what we imagine because of our own experience and what we think may or may not happen. But there's something very specific happening right now. Conversations between the top leaders, conversations between all the parties involved, measures so that people will be meeting in the coming days to get to specifics. No one's waiting for the next week to maybe have another call, to maybe figure out something, maybe you'll show up. These are specific actions that are being taken immediately. So we've been in this really fast environment where everything's happening fast. The good news is, so is peace. We've never been closer. So there's all kinds of reasons that might be informing President Putin's reasoning. I don't know, and I'm not going to guess at what those are. What I do know is what President Trump is doing, the hard and fast framework of what we expect in the next few days in Saudi Arabia, the people who are committed to this, and that everyone now is at a table to get this to the same goal.
Thank you. If I may.
Yeah, all right. Daphne.
Just a question on Turkey.
President Erdogan's main political rival has been detained on charges of corruption and aiding a terrorist group. What's the U.S. stance on this? Do you have any concerns?
Well, we would encourage Turkey to respect human rights, to handle its own internal framework appropriately. Yeah, we're not going to comment on the decision-making, the internal decision-making of another country, but except to remind them that we expect them to behave in a manner that respects the rights of all of its citizens. And I think that's pretty obvious, but it's good to repeat. Yes, sir, standing. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Tammy. In Pakistan, the most popular leader, Imran Khan, has been in jail now for last.
Could you introduce yourself too? First time seeing you. Jaleel. Nice to meet you, sir.
Thank you, Tammy. In Pakistan, the most popular leader with the majority number of seats in the parliament, Imran Khan, and the biggest charity collector as well, has been languishing in jail since last 2 years. And in 2 years, everything in the country, whether it is the democracy, whether it is the women's rights, everything has been shattered since last 2 years. President Trump was talking a lot about Pakistan before the elections, and thousands of his new voters in the US and millions of Pakistanis are expecting him to take some sort of action with regard to that country. Do you have anything in mind or have heard anything the president said?
Well, what I can tell you, as I've just noted about Turkey, is I'm not going to comment on the internal frameworks of another country. I do know that, what's it been, 8 weeks? President Trump's been here 8 weeks?
Yes.
And it's a lot's going on, right? Regarding his intentions and actions, you can reach out to the White House. But I do think that, President Trump has made it clear that, as has Secretary Rubio, that we care about the planet, we care about our neighbors, we care about what's happening on the globe, and that's been evidenced by our actions. So, thank you, sir. Yes. All right, now, go with you. I've been skipping around you here, and there's no reason for that.
Thank you, Tammy. Switching to deportations, if I may,
Well, maybe I'll have another mulligan. As you know, I wanted to go back to the consumer sentiment, particularly the inflation expectations in the University of Michigan survey. In the summer of 2022, you cited the rise in the long-term inflation expectations in that index as the reason that you went big with a 3/4 point hike. So I know you've talked about all the different measures now, but you seem to not be placing the same weight on that. And so I'm just wondering.
Well, I think we know of one request that El Salvador had, which is they wanted 2 of the worst MS-13 members deported back to them. And we said, okay. So they got those 2 MS-13 gang members. What we also know when it comes to El Salvador is they're dedicated to working with partners to end the crisis of illegal immigration, is committed to accept certain individuals removed from the United States, including the TDA members. And they also, besides the MS-13 members, they also requested 21 of its most wanted gang members who are El Salvadoran to go back as well. So we accommodated that also. And we plan to work with Congress to provide assistance to support El Salvador's correction system, which seems fair. And on Venezuela, you're asking if there's been any more. Well, I think the message I mentioned at the top of this briefing was that they've got to start doing it, or there's going to be serious problems. There's going to be sanctions, and we will be reacting. So they've been told they've got to. At this point, I don't believe any more certainly has moved, and certainly some of this we're looking at the judge's order, et cetera. But what we do know is that deportation flights will continue to other countries and other regions. All right. Oh, yes, yes, please. Yes, Nick.
On Friday, Special Envoy Grinnell announced that Venezuela had agreed to accept the repatriation flights.
Well, that's nice. It's nice to say so, and doing it will be an important gesture.
But have they signaled that they're reneging on that agreement that's been announced, or?
Well, again, I'll refer you to the Secretary's tweet, which I think speaks for itself. It was very strong. President Trump said also that Maduro has not been taking Venezuelan deportees back fast enough. And this is not something that will be negotiated. Also, nor does it merit any reward of any sort. And also, if he does not accept the return of the deportees, of course, we will start to employ escalating sanctions. So it is about what our requirements are for a well, I'll just leave it at that. I was going into my talk radio mode, and that was not going to be appropriate. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. From Al Jazeera.
Very good. Nice to meet you.
I just want to go back to the statement about Ukraine, in which it is stated that American ownership of power plants within Ukraine would be a way of guaranteeing their protection. Is we talking about physical ownership, taking over ownership of the plants from the Ukrainian authorities?
Well, again, that comes from President Trump, who is one of the best businessmen we think has ever been around, and he knows how to make deals. And there's a serious consideration, in fact, that if you have an American-owned entity via a company, perhaps not certainly the government necessarily, that creates, I think the presumption is that it creates a deterrent to strike, that you have also an economic partnership that increases the economic viability of a nation, the general, certainly infrastructure stability of a nation. When you have people running your infrastructure or in a particular part of the infrastructure who know what they're doing, and that maintains not just the economic framework, but also a security framework because of the nature and the need for energy. It also is, I think it is, and I don't want to presume what President Trump was considering, but just as a regular person, you'd realize that it is probably somewhat beneficial to have an economic relationship with a nation that has a history of being able to protect itself and protect its friends and makes it a little bit more difficult to attack you because of what the results might be. All right. Yes, sir.
Ahmed Hazim, Jazeera Arabic this time. Just want to go back to Gaza. I don't think that I got some of your answer there. Is the U.S. proposal that Hamas rejected, as you said, is it still on the table? And are you still pushing for another kind of a deal that to end this new escalation now and get us back to the track to negotiation for the second phase of the original ceasefire agreement?
Yes, knowing the envoys, the special envoys that we have, it's not that anything is off the table. It is about adhering to what the bridge would be, when would have been, and that is something that can still happen. So that's what we hope for. It's why we do this, right? It's wanting to have that and to try to forestall saying no and going back to the old dynamic. So when you've worked hard on an issue and it's a proposal that's been made, that certainly is something that can be revisited. All right. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Tammy. One question on Iraq. How does this administration, looking at the disputes between Erbil and Baghdad over the...
I'm sorry, between what?
Between the Christian region of Iraq and Iraqi government over the energy issue and also over the budget issue. And are you willing to help to resolve this issue? And my second question, you said the diplomacy is the best tool to approach the Iran to resolve the issues between you. But what we hear from the Iranian foreign minister, they say that there are that they don't go to negotiate with the U.S. with the maximum pressure. How do you see this condition? Are you willing to get them some relief?
Well, here's what I'll say about the Iraqi government, that we're urging the Iraqi government to reach an agreement. You're talking about energy, yes?
Yeah.
With the international oil companies to resume oil exports through the Iraq-Turkey pipeline as soon as possible, and to honor the existing contracts with U.S. companies. So that's part of the issue. Reopening the ITP ensures Iraqi oil can reach global, especially European markets. Iraq benefits from the stability of resilient supply chains, as we all do. Regarding Iran, I can't speak to their reasoning on most anything, obviously, but President Trump has an approach that he is committed to because he wants a result. And we are seeing some of those results now, and we will continue to see more. Certainly, the Houthis are seeing the results of what we are committed to do to make sure that things change in this planet. And I have no doubt Iran has noticed that. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, there are reports in the Lebanese media that Morgan...
I'm sorry, in which media?
Lebanese media.
Lebanese media, yes.
Yes, that Morgan Ortagus had calls with the Speaker and the Prime Minister, pressuring, I'm quoting here, pressuring them to start negotiations, political negotiations with the Israeli beyond the ceasefire. Is this accurate? Are you trying to start negotiations?
Well, so you're asking a question about something that you saw in media that may or may not have happened, and so is a hypothetical, and that I should speculate. I can't do that. We're going to move on. Yes, ma'am, in the back, right there, with glasses. Yes, ma'am.
I want to move to the Red Sea, please, and talk about the Red Sea
I'd say
shipping.
stay right here, but yes, go ahead.
Yeah, the commercial activity there obviously very disrupted. Is the United States working with partners like Great Britain, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia to solve the problem with Houthi attacks in the Red Sea? Or is that just a U.S. Attack right now?
I need to go back and check, because I was going to presume here, and I need to go back and check and see regarding what other elements might be involved. But let's make sure we get that to her, should we? All right, good.
Can I also ask that on Ukraine, with the power plants in Zaporizhia, Mykolaiv, and Kursk, if there's any move to have some observers come and look, because those have been at least on generators, some of them for 3 years.
Well, I'm sure that when we're just, what Saudi Arabia will have with this meeting of technical individuals, that's even a point after a ceasefire has been achieved, right, when you have observers, right? That is not, none of that is going to be discussed. Nothing with either Russia or Ukraine can be discussed regarding that until we have a ceasefire, to where then we can move to talk about the specifics of how to implement the security as we move forward. So we will.
There are people that are in place to observe.
All right. We do one more?
Yeah,
and we'll,
Bangladesh.
I'm sorry?
On Bangladesh?
Bangladesh. All right, yes.
Thank you so much. And Tammy, congratulations. This is your third time, but this is my first time here. Thank you so much.
All right, good. So I'm not the newbie then.
Okay.
Good.
U.S. Intelligence Chief Ms. Tulsi Gabbard has warned about Bangladesh that growing threat of Islamist extremism and effort to establish an Islamic caliphate. While she didn't directly accuse the interim government of, led by Muhammad Yunus, but Muhammad Yunus has vehemently denied this concern, calling them untrue. However, just yesterday, a large pro-caliphate rally took place in Dhaka University. If you let me, this is the picture here, raising serious concern about the situation. Given the U.S. government ongoing concern, U.S. considering taking serious action such as sanction against Yunus government. And second part,
Second part. May I address this? In general, may I address this, sir?
And
Thank you.
8 years.
I think we're looking for a response, and I'm going to give you one.
Please.
We condemn any instances of violence or intolerance directed toward members of minority communities in any country, and have welcomed measures taken by Bangladesh's interim government to ensure safety and security for all in Bangladesh. That's what we're watching. That's what we expect. And that will be what continues.
And
thank you, everyone. We've got a very busy day in front of us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here. We will do it. I know there might be more things to talk about on Friday. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Claire Jones, Financial Times. You said in January, Chair Powell, that inflation expectations remained well anchored would you still say they remain well anchored today? And just to reiterate the question others have asked, if they're not so well anchored, why hasn't there been a more radical shift to the policy path today? Thank you.
So when we talk about inflation expectations being well anchored, we're talking about longer run inflation expectations. And they really haven't moved much, I mean, if at all. There's one reading that everyone's focusing on that it's higher, but the other survey readings and the market-based readings all show relatively, well-anchored inflation expectations. You would expect that expectations of inflation over the course of a year would move around because conditions change, and in this case, we have tariffs coming in. We don't know how big, what's there's so many things we don't know, but we kind of know there are going to be tariffs, and they tend to bring growth down. They tend to bring inflation up in the first instance. So I would say, I'm not dismissing what we're seeing in short-term inflation expectations. We, as I mentioned, follow that very carefully. But when we say expectations are well anchored, we're really looking at longer terms, 5-year and out, and there's really no story to tell 5 years and out, either in market-based or in surveys. But we'll watch it. I mean, we're not we're not going to miss any evidence that longer-term or medium-term inflation expectations are moving.
Hi, Chair Powell. Neil Irwin with Axios. Treasury Secretary Bessent has observed that a large share of job growth over the last couple of years has been in what he calls government or government-adjacent sectors, healthcare, education. Do you agree that there's some weakness in underlying private job growth, and do you see the composition of job growth as something that has policy implications?
So that has been the case. We talked about that over the course of the last year. There were some good number of months and times when a lot of the job creation was concentrated in, educational institutions, healthcare, state governments, things like that. There were also times when private sector job growth has been moving in a healthy range. I mean, they're all jobs, but and remember, we're at very low unemployment for quite a time now. So I think it's a good labor market, but it's something that we monitor carefully. From our standpoint, employment is employment. But the elected government is entitled to have, we don't have policies that address different kinds of employment, but the elected government has a different role, and they can have those.
Can I do a quick QT question? Does the committee envision at some point tapering the MBS runoff as well?
I think tapering it, I don't know. There's no plan to do that. At a certain point, we'll stop runoff. And we may or may not stop MBS runoff, though, because we want to stop runoff in net at some point. We haven't made any decisions about that. We want the MBS to roll off our balance sheet. We really strongly desire that. So, but we haven't made any decisions about that. I think we'd look carefully at letting that keep going, but hold the overall size of the balance sheet in constant at some point, a point that we're not out yet.
Simon Rabinovich with The Economist. Thank you, Chair Powell. Several times today you've said that you feel you're well positioned to wait for greater clarity. At the same time, you could point to quite a few growth risks at the moment. We've seen a stock market that's gone quite wobbly, rapidly cooling housing sales, plunge in confidence surveys. Today, not only did the S&P mark down the growth outlook, 17 of 19 see risks to the downside. So my question is, how confident are you that you're well positioned, or is that one more thing that you're uncertain about?
I'm confident that we're well positioned in the sense that we're well positioned to move in the direction we'll need to move. I don't know anyone who has a lot of confidence in their forecast. I mean, the point is we are at we're at a place where we can cut, or we can hold what is clearly a restrictive stance of policy. And that's what I mean. I think that's well positioned. Forecasting right now, forecasting is always very, very hard, and in the current situation, I just think uncertainty is remarkably high.
And sorry, standing here today, would you be surprised to pivot back towards rate cuts in May?
I think we're not going to be in any hurry to move, and as I mentioned, I think we're well positioned to wait for further clarity. and not in any hurry.
Matt Egan with CNN. Thank you, Chair Powell. The Fed statement released today removed the line that previously said the committee judges that the risks to achieving its employment and inflation goals are roughly in balance. Can you explain the decision to remove that line? Does it mean that you're now more concerned about inflation or about employment?
Actually, it does not mean either of those things. You know, sometimes with language, it lives its useful life, and then we take it off, and that was the case here. There's really not meant to be any signal here. Over the past year, you know, conveying the sense of the balance of risks was important, that they be in balance or close to being in balance. That was useful as we approached liftoff, if you remember, but we're past that. I'm sorry, no, beginning to cut. So we just took it out. I actually would say that the more important thing now about risks, and this is in the pages like 10, 11, 12 of the SEP, if you look, participants widely raised their estimate of the risks to of uncertainty, but also of the risks to growth and our employment and inflation mandates. That's a more salient point now than whether they're in balance.
Just on the stock market has obviously declined significantly since the Fed last met. Are you concerned at all about some of the market volatility having a real economic impact in terms of hurting business spending or consumer spending, especially among higher income households?
So financial conditions matter to us because, you know, financial conditions are the main channel to the real economy through which our policy has its effects. So they're important. But what matters from a Fed standpoint for the macro economy is material changes to overall financial conditions that are persistent, that last for a while, long enough to actually affect economic activity. So that's what we're looking for. I'm not going to opine on the appropriate level of any market, equity, debt, commodities, or anything like that. And I would just point you to the bigger picture again. You know, the real economy, the hard data, are still in reasonably good shape. It's the soft data, it's the surveys that are showing, you know, significant concerns, downside risks, and those kind of things. We don't dismiss that. We're watching it carefully, but, you know, we don't want to get ahead of that. You know, we want to focus on the hard data. If that's going to affect the hard data, we should know it very quickly, and of course we'll understand that. But you don't see that yet.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Jennifer Schonberger with Yahoo Finance. As you look to navigate higher inflation and lower growth, the Fed has talked about heeding the lessons from the 1970s. Is the Fed willing to have a recession if it means breaking the back of inflation?
Well, fortunately, we're in a situation where we have seen inflation move down from, you know, higher levels to pretty close to 2%. While the unemployment rate has remained very consistent with full employment, 4.1%. So we now have inflation coming in from an exogenous source, but the underlying inflationary picture before that was, you know, basically 2.5% inflation, I would say, and 2% growth and 4% unemployment. So that's what we did. That's what together the economy accomplished. So I don't see any reason to think that we're looking at a replay of the 70s or anything like that. You know, inflation, underlying inflation is you know, still running in the 2s with probably a little bit of a pickup associated with tariffs. So I don't think we're facing, I wouldn't say we're in a situation that's remotely comparable to that.
And last month, the idea of a Doge dividend was proposed, which would send $5,000 checks to every taxpayer from Doge savings. President Trump and Elon Musk have supported this. There's reports there could be a bill introduced on Capitol Hill. What impact might that have on household savings and spending in terms of your growth and outlook for inflation?
You know, it's not appropriate for me to speculate on political ideas or fiscal policy for that matter. So I'm gonna pass on that one. Thank you.
Daniel.
Hi, Chair Powell. Daniel Avis from Agence France Presse. You mentioned that tariffs are already having at least some impact on inflation. I'm just wondering how you and your colleagues on the FOMC have been thinking about the possibility of retaliatory tariffs from other countries, especially with April the 2nd coming up. Was it something you considered during this meeting? Thanks.
So since the very beginning, we've had kind of a placeholder. The staff has a placeholder of really a range of possible outcomes from tariffs and from trade policy generally. And they generally assume full retaliation in those. And so that's kind of baked into the numbers. What happens, it will be complicated, and there will be some retaliation and some not, and all that. But ultimately, they're trying to, with the placeholder, give us a broad sense of what this might look like. When we actually know the specifics, we'll be able to have still uncertain, but better informed forecasts. So yes, that's in there.
Last question goes to Jean.
Hi, Chair Powell. Jean Young with MNI Market News. Had a couple questions on the balance sheet change that you made. So the minutes had initially described your discussion on slowing QT as temporary until the debt ceiling is resolved. But from what you said earlier, it doesn't sound like there's a desire to kind of regain the pace of QT that we have at the moment after the debt ceiling is resolved. Is that the case?
Yeah, so we looked at pausing and we looked at slowing, and really people came together very strongly behind slowing, not pausing, for a variety of reasons. And so people really came to be, pretty strongly in favor of this move. Slows down the path and probably lengthens it, doubles it effectively by slowing by half. That people thought that's a good place to be. It'll help us assure that this path is a smooth one as we get closer and closer to that. So that's how that came about.
Well, I guess my question is more, was that meant to be a temporary measure during the debt ceiling episode, or?
It was the TGA flows, Treasury General Account flows, that got us thinking about this. But the more we thought about it, we came around to this. And it is, yes, it was provoked. The original discussion was provoked by that. But I think what we came up with, though, was broader than that and different than that. It does address that issue, but it really is also, it fits in really nicely with our principles and our plans and the things we've done before and the things we said we would do. So that's why, pretty strong support. I'd just say it's nothing to do with monetary policy, nothing to do with the size of the balance sheet. It's just kind of a common sense adjustment as you get closer and closer. Let's slow down a little bit again. And that way we'll be more and more confident that we're getting where we need to get. You can take our time getting there. We're shrinking the balance sheet every month, and we think it was a good play, and as I mentioned, well supported. Thanks very much.
I'm sorry. I don't know. He appears to be walking. It all kind of died down. Of course, I believe that he ends up with the ambulance. What? No more idea. Yeah, you wouldn't have gotten it. I know. The explosive that he hit is going to go off as soon as you get your car, man. Man, we're going to get it. No one of the PIOs an answer. Still deciding red wire or blue wire. Saw is coming back. All right. how he like ate his name. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna give this 5 more minutes. Yeah. You should probably. What else are they doing? They're probably like, where do we take this? Probably like, where's the keys? Yeah. Sounds good.
That's my trade. That's my only trade.
Yeah.
How many photos did I see SNL using yours?
No clue. Probably a decent amount.
It's not all seen here, but not that you guys enjoy on this one.
Alright, they haven't moved this up to the wire, so I'm gonna, I can move it up. I'm gonna get some off. Oh yeah, the other
No, we just saw him go in that white truck. He's in that white, not the. Yeah, he's in that truck. Yeah, he's in that. That's why we've been here. Trying to wait for our view. Did you see the guy that looked like? You saw the guy that looked like a cast member from Bill and Ted? Yeah, that was him. Yeah, but he.
I thought that's what I saw. Why I wasn't.
Yeah, we saw
this one.